Good evening, America, and welcome to the B-Lock Show. I am your host, Brandon Locke. If you're watching right now, thank you. I'm glad you're here, and I appreciate you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed my intro song. That is my brother, Maestro, and his partner, Ross Augusta. Check them out. This is episode 2 in a very early production of the B-Lock Show, and I just want to jump right into it. So, unfortunately, we have to start off with some somber news. Representative John Lewis, who is a member of Congress and a iconic civil rights leader, passed away last night. And I would be remiss if I did not take some time to honor his legacy. So, enjoy.
His life, John Lewis stood for people's rights. Born on an Alabama cotton farm into a segregated America, he'd not only lived to see an African-American elected president, he would be a major part of making it happen.
Tonight we gather here in this magnificent stadium in Denver because we still have a dream. We still have a dream.
Lewis, growing up, was angered by the unfairness of the Jim Crow South. He credited Martin Luther King Jr. for inspiring him to join the civil rights movement. And eventually, Lewis would become one of its most prominent leaders. As a student, he organized sit-ins at lunch counters. In the early 60s, he was a freedom rider, challenging segregation at interstate bus terminals across the South. The embodiment of nonviolence, he frequently suffered beatings by angry mobs. Lewis, 23 years old at the time, was the youngest speaker at the 1963 March on Washington.
We do not want our freedom gradually, but we want to be free now.
Then, 2 years later, led a march for voting rights in Selma. On the Edmund Pettus Bridge, he and the other marchers were met by heavily armed state and local police. They were set upon and beaten. Lewis suffering a fractured skull. It would be forever remembered as Bloody Sunday. The images of brutality shocked the nation, galvanizing support for the Voting Rights Act signed into law by President Lyndon Johnson. Lewis never lost his young activist spirit, taking it from protest to politics. Standing up for what he believed was right, Lewis was arrested more than 40 times by police, according to his congressional office.
I'm on my way, and we're going to win this race.
He was elected to city council in Atlanta, then to Congress in Washington, representing Georgia's 5th District, fighting against poverty and for health care while working to help younger generations by improving education. He reached out to young people in other ways, co-writing a series of graphic novels about the civil rights movement, winning him a National Book Award. In a life of so many moments and great achievements, it was the achievement of another in 2008 that perhaps meant the most. The election of President Barack Obama.
And we have never been just a collection of individuals or a collection of red states and blue states. We are and always will be the United States of America.
A dream Lewis admits was too impossible to consider decades before, even as he fought to forge its foundation.
This is a unbelievable period in our history. Martin Luther King Jr. will be very pleased to see what is happening in America. This is a long way from the March on Washington. It's a great distance from marching across that bridge in Selma in 1965 for the right to vote.
In 2011, after more than 50 years on the front lines of civil rights, Lewis received the nation's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, placed around his neck by America's first black president. Lewis wasn't content to just making history. He was also dedicated to preserving it. Consider the impetus of the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. And he never stopped stirring up good trouble, as he liked to call it, boycotting the inaugurations of George W. Bush after the contested 2000 election, and vocally opposing Donald Trump in 2017, citing suspicions of Russian election meddling. At a protest against President Trump's immigration policy, the congressman, by then an elder statesman of the Democratic Party, riled up the crowd with words he had lived by as an activist, as a lawmaker, as a leader.
We must never, ever give up. We must be brave, bold, and courageous.
So as you see, John Lewis was a major player in the civil rights movement. His legacy will be forever cemented in American history. I just want to personally thank him for his contributions to the Black community and to this country. I want to send my prayers and thoughts and condolences to his family. And thank you. I just want to say thank you. Moving on. Now, this next topic, it's a little touchy because I'm a teacher, as I said in the first episode, and I may be having to go back to work in a month. Just for some context, I haven't been, working at, in-person school since March, mid-March. So basically, I haven't been working for 5 months. We did remote learning from mid-March to early June, and now it was okay. Obviously, I do PE, so it's very different for me because I'm not able to do activity with my students. And I also had to teach driver's ed remotely, so it was a challenge. I'm not gonna lie, it was a challenge. It was a challenge to get a lot of student participation, but I think overall it was, we were making the best of a bad situation. So, we have this Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, who I am not a fan of and who I believe has no idea what she's doing. But she recently did an interview with Dana Bash about school reopenings. And I'm going to let you watch first and then we'll discuss. Because just based on her interview, it actually makes me more uncomfortable about going back. Watch this.
You said this week, quote, that there's nothing in the data that suggests it would not be appropriate to have kids in school. So I want to take a look at that data. The U.S. hit a record number of new cases on Friday. The number of new cases per day is higher now in 45 of the 50 states than when schools shut down in March. Hospitalizations are climbing in several states, and some ICUs are at or near capacity. So yes or no, can you assure students, teachers, parents that they will not get coronavirus because they're going back to school?
Well, the key is that kids have to get back to school, and we know there are going to be hotspots, and those need to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. But the rule should be that kids go back to school this fall. They've been missing months of learning. Many of them are going to be so far behind, it's difficult to catch up. And we know that this is a matter of their health in a multitude of factors or multitude of dimensions. We know that their emotional well-being, their mental well-being, and particularly for kids from low-income and vulnerable populations, this is devastating to be out of school and not learning for months on end.
Madam Secretary, I don't think anybody disagrees with that. I mean, I'm a parent. I want my school-age child to go back to school as much as you are saying you want for everybody. But the question is, can it happen safely? So can you, by saying what you just said, also assure parents, students, children, everybody who's there, that they're going to be able to do so safely?
Well, we know that children get the virus at a far lower rate than any other part of the population. And again, there is nothing in the data that would suggest that kids being back in school is dangerous to them. And in fact, it's more a matter of their health and well-being that they be back in school. And we've seen this in other countries in Europe and elsewhere in the world, where students have gone back to school and have done so very successfully. That should be the goal.
Well, we do know that children can spread the virus. For example, there was a summer camp in Missouri which closed after 82 campers and staff tested positive. Texas says more than 1,300 children and employees in a child care facility tested positive. And here's what the CDC guidelines say. If children meet in groups, it can put everyone at risk. Children can pass this virus onto others who have an increased risk of severe illness from COVID-19. That's your own federal government's guidelines.
And we also know that, but the key is every school should have plans for that situation to be able to pivot and ensure that kids can continue learning at a distance if they have to for a short period of time.
You're the Secretary of Education. You're asking students to go back. So why do you not have guidance on what a school should do just weeks before you want those schools to reopen? And what happens if it faces an outbreak?
You know, there's really good examples that have been utilized in the private sector and elsewhere, also with frontline workers and hospitals. And all of that data and all of that information and all of those exampents can be referenced by school leaders.
But I'm not hearing a plan from the Department of Education. Do you have a plan for what students and what schools should do?
So schools should do what's right on the ground at that time for their students and for their situation. There is no one uniform approach that we can take or should take nationwide.
But can I just ask you,
of a school in the city of Detroit are very, in my home state, in the city of Detroit, would be very different than that of a school in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
And that's the point. That's completely understandable. But you are arguing over and over that they should handle this on a local level. But at the same time, as the Secretary of Education, you are trying to push them to do a one-size-fits-all approach, which is go back and reopen schools. You can't have it both ways.
I am urging all schools to be to open and to be providing their students a full-time education. We all acknowledge that that could and may well look different in a certain area that has a flare-up of the virus. But the go-to should be that schools are opening and fully functional and operational and giving parents and families the flexibility that's necessary. So if there is a situation where a child is has a vulnerable, underlying condition, that the parents could have a choice to be able to.
So just to be clear, are you saying that areas where there is a flare-up, that schools should revert to remote learning?
I'm saying that schools should have plans, like Miami-Dade County has. They should have plans, and that parents and families should know what their options are.
I'm asking you, ma'am, as Secretary of Education, if there is a flare-up, should schools revert to remote learning? You're very aggressive about saying reopen, and the next question, the obvious question is, what happens if they feel that they can't? Are you comfortable with remote learning if they can't?
I think the go-to needs to be kids in school, in person, in the classroom, because we know for most kids that's the best environment for them.
I understand that,
and we
but
have to also understand what if they can't what?
What if the school district feels that they can't safely go into the school because there is a flare-up in that district? Remote learning, are you okay with it in that situation?
If there's a short-term flare-up for a few days, that's a different situation than planning for an entire school year in anticipation of something that hasn't happened.
Yeah. So, I just want to say this first off. I'm not a parent. I do not have children of my own. So I cannot relate to, when it comes to for parents having to send their kids back to school, because I know that for some parents, like, they can't go to work if their kids can't go back to school, or, it affects them financially, or, so I in that sense, I cannot relate, but I am a teacher, and I understand that going back into the schools right now is risky. There are a couple things that I want to point out that Betsy DeVos said, that if you have the right context, you can understand why what she's saying makes no sense. So, number one, she brought up Europe and these other countries sending their kids back to school and doing it successfully, which is true. Remember, this show is about facts, so that is true. But what is also true is that Europe has nowhere near the amount of coronavirus cases that the United States does. We are way higher. So you can't leave out those facts. Of course, if you have less coronavirus cases, it makes it more manageable to send your kids back to school. So, but she conveniently left that part out. So to me, that's a false fact, because you're leaving out the fact that the U.S. is struggling with coronavirus while these other countries are actually handling and getting it under control. So, yeah, they can send their kids back to school because they've done what they needed to do. They went into lockdown. They had people wear masks. They got their testing to where it needed to be. They have their situations under control. So, to me, that was a false fact. Also, suggesting that kids being at school is not dangerous to them. You saw what the CDC said. Not only that, it's amazing to me that the Secretary of Education has no regard for the safety of her teachers at all. She did not mention the teacher's safety at any point in that interview. Yes, it may not be dangerous for the kids, majority of them that get the virus. But what about the teachers? You know how many teachers there are that are older in age? What if an older teacher catches it? I mean, it's amazing to me that the Secretary of Education has no regard for teacher safety. I mean, the CDC guidelines are right there telling her that it is dangerous for kids to commute in a group like that, and it's dangerous to other people, and she's still trying to force this. I mean, just as a teacher, it's just a slap in the face. It's a slap in the face. And, it's risky for the kids too. I mean, I believe there was a point where she said that 0.4% of students may get coronavirus. That still means that 400 kids might possibly catch the virus and die. So it's boggling to me, honestly, that this is the person that's leading our Department of Education. Just another fact, she was actually threatening to cut funding for schools, just like the president was saying. She agreed that they should cut funding for schools that refuse to open in person. So, basically she's trying to force all these schools to go back in person, regardless of safety or whatever. So, I mean, I'm just gonna leave it there. I could say more, but I'd get angrier. So, moving on. Sports. The Washington Redskins are fighting two battles right now: racism and a hostile work environment, apparently. So if you're not aware of this story, the Washington Redskins, and just to give you some context and some past history, Dan Snyder, who is the owner of the Washington Redskins, growing up as a child, he was always a fan of the team. He told this story about how as a child he always was a fan of the team. He had some successful ventures and was able to buy the team that he grew up loving. So, that's a great story to me. I think that, who wouldn't want to own the team that they grew up loving? But here's where things get dicey. The term Redskin is an offensive term to Native Americans, and they've been telling the owner that it's offensive. And Dan Snyder has been defiant in saying that he would not change the name. He was actually quoted as saying he will never change the name, knowing how they felt about it. So, and this is maybe over 10, this is years in the making. So, we fast forward now to the Black Lives Matter movement and the fight for racial injustice in this country. And, now this story is really put on the front lines, and he's basically in a spot where he has had to change the name. On another side, it's been reported that there has been some sexual assault allegations and harassment and just terrible employee conditions in the organization. Watch these videos, and then we'll come back and talk about it some more.
Proof today that activism matters, and never doesn't always mean never. The NFL's Washington Redskins are changing the team name and the team's Native American logo, a name and a logo many found offensive, racist. Here's the statement from the team. Dan Snyder and Coach Rivera are working closely to develop a new name and a design approach that will enhance the standing of our proud, tradition-rich franchise and inspire our sponsors, fans, and community for the next 100 years. The team took the name Redskins 87 years ago. The new name will be revealed at a later date. Let's bring in Dante Stallworth, a veteran NFL wide receiver who played a season with the Redskins. Dante, thanks so much for being here. Let's be honest up front. This is not altruism. This is capitalism. Dan Snyder finally, after saying 7 years ago, never would he change the name of the team. That's what he said 7 years ago. FedEx, Pepsi, Nike, Bank of America, among those saying, you want our sponsorship, you got to change the name. Still, progress?
Owner Daniel Snyder and team president Bruce Allen have not been accused of harassment, but some of the women claim it was unlikely that Snyder and Allen had no idea what was going on in terms of all this behavior. Head coach Ron Rivera released the statement after the story broke. The biggest thing is that we have to move forward from this and make sure everybody understands we have policies that we will follow and that we have an open door policy with no retribution. Plus, my daughter works for the team, and I sure as hell am not going to allow any of this. These matters, as reported, are serious, disturbing, and contrary to the NFL's values. Everyone in the NFL has the right to work in an environment free from any and all forms of harassment. Washington has engaged outside counsel to conduct a thorough investigation into these allegations. The club has pledged that it will give its full cooperation to the investigator, and we expect the club and all employees to do so. We will meet with the attorneys upon the conclusion of their investigation and take any action based on the findings. All right, Adam Schefter, I want to start with you here. Ron Rivera has already commented on the allegations on this investigation, but crazy thing is we have yet to hear from owner Dan Snyder. So what can or should we expect from Dan Snyder?
Has to respond to these charges and allegations that the Washington Post issued yesterday. He has no choice but to address this. This has been in his organization, allegedly. This is something that is embarrassing. This is something that's unacceptable. This is something that he has to address. He can't sit silent on this issue. There are so many issues that Dan Snyder has had so many people like Bruce Allen or Ron Rivera speak up for him in the past. But this is his organization, and his organization did things that are unacceptable in today's world. And so the man at the top has no choice in my mind but to address these allegations today and talk about how sickened and disgusted so many people are by them. And let's see what he does have to say. I expect that he will say something. I expect he will issue a statement today. And again, we'll see what he decides to say when he does that. Charlie?
Yeah. So, as you can see, the Washington Redskins have really kind of stepped in it at the moment. If you're a Washington Redskins fan, I know this is a tough time for you. I mean, really, in a way, it's actually a good and bad thing. Obviously, the employee harassment situation is the terrible part, and that obviously needs to be addressed right away. Because, I mean, I know Dan Snyder knew about that stuff and just apparently didn't handle it because you're the owner. There's no way you had no idea about it. But the good thing about this is that because now the name's going to be changed. And this battle that people have been fighting for years to change the name, they won. And we're going to have a new name for the Washington team. So I think, there's good and bad in this story. But there's real progress being made. And, sometimes you have to face your mistakes to make things better. We all make mistakes. Nobody's perfect in this world. I don't know Dan Snyder personally. I don't know him as a man. But you learn how people are what they're made of when they are faced with their own problems and situations and mistakes. So at the moment, it seems like they're trying to, resolve the situation and fix it. We'll see what the conclusion of the story is, and we'll come back to it when there is a conclusion. Lastly, and I know you guys see me smiling because you guys know that I love Marvel, and I said in episode 1 that I was going to talk about this. Marvel's Avengers. Now, before I even play this trailer, they actually put a trailer. It was like a short, maybe 30-second trailer out for this game back in, I want to say 2017. No, I'm sorry, go back. 2015. It was 2015. And I remember getting so excited. Now, the thing is, the trailer was really short, and honestly, it was very vague. I didn't really know what it was, but at the end of it, it said Marvel's Avengers, so I assumed it was an actual game. But it was very vague, so I didn't want to get too excited, but I was excited because it's what it sounded like. Now we have full confirmation. It's actually been out for a while, but we have full confirmation that we have an Avengers game. Now, I just want to say this, these are the same people that made Marvel Spider-Man. So I know that this game is going to be awesome. And if you're a Marvel fan, even if you're not a Marvel fan, you got to love great games. You got to love great stories. And so watch this trailer. Enjoy.
Never meet your heroes. Well, I did. And it was awesome. The Avengers were everything I imagined.
Hello, San Francisco!
Thor, Tony, check it out. At once. Try to keep up.
This just got a whole lot more interesting.
Let's make this quick. Secure the bridge. Those weapons can't get into this.
You set him up. Well, knock him down.
Thor, what's your status?
There are humans trapped. Lots of small, angry men with guns.
Is that a joke? Did Thor make a joke? Cap, take out pulsar tanks.
Tony, Thor, the cables! Cap, what's going on over there?
Start the Chimera. What's your status? We should head back.
No, stay on task. There are still civilians on this bridge. Damn it, they played us. Some say they were set up. Others call them murderers.
Do the Avengers pose a danger to society? That was the question, Bruce. That was the question.
Well, we all lost something that day. But that's not how this story ends.
Yes. So, this game is going to be amazing. One thing that I love about it is that it's an original story. They didn't take this story from the comics. They didn't, this isn't anything that you've seen before. This is a completely original story. And it looks great. The action looks great. The graphics look great. Why wouldn't you be excited? So, I wanted to end on a happy note, because like I said, there's always so much going on. I think it's always good to end on a happy note. So Marvel's Avengers, it comes out September 4th. I believe September 4th. Maybe not September 4th, but definitely it comes out in September. So I will be at GameStop getting that. Well, this is the conclusion of episode 2. I'm having a lot of fun doing this. Actually, more fun than I thought I would. Because as I told you in season 1, I'm not an in front of the camera guy. But I feel like I'm actually doing something with all that's going up in here. And I hope that you're enjoying it. I hope that you keep coming back and watching. I'm going to try to provide, like I said, at least 2 episodes a week, maybe more. And I'm going to stick to that commitment because I want to make sure that I push myself and hold myself accountable. And like I said, I'm here to just inform, educate, and, put a smile on your face or, just bring you some joy. And I hope I did that today. So, as I said before, stay safe, stay informed, stay united, America. Have a good night.